Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Pot Sports, an everyman's take on sports, news, and trends. I'm your host, David, and last time we did a tier list of all 32 NFL teams, and today we have a video where we're going to be ranking all 30 teams in the NBA. My last video was a bit long-winded, it was almost 40 minutes, so I'll try and keep it a little bit shorter this time. And so, without much further ado, let's go over the different tiers that we have today. First up, we have the teams that are going to win more than 55 games. These are the teams that are going to be the 1 or 2 seeds in their respective conferences and truly the contenders who are going to have a very good shot at the NBA Finals. Below that, we have teams that are going to win anywhere from 48 to 54 games. Teams who might not be the very top contenders right now, but are maybe just a small piece at the trade deadline away from being these true contenders. These are very good teams that could very well make a deep playoff run. Below that, we have the teams that are going to win anywhere from 42 to 47 games. These are teams that are going to be in the middle seeds, the 5-6 seeds of each conference, and are probably not going to make a very deep run, but are still going to be very competitive throughout the season. Below that, we have teams that are going to win anywhere from 32 to 41 games. 41 games is 500 in the NBA, and so these are the teams that are going to be the low seeds, or in the play-in, and depending on the conference, might not even make the play-in at all. These are teams that are not quite good enough to compete, but not quite bad enough to truly be tanking right now. And at the very bottom, we have teams that are going to win less than 32 games. These teams are not going to be very competitive. They're probably looking towards the draft to improve. They're trying to get prospects like Victor Wembanyama, and that's really their best shot going forward. So, let's start off here with the Milwaukee Bucks. And Milwaukee, I think, is still going to be one of the very best teams in the NBA. The first or second seed in that Eastern Conference. Giannis Antetokounmpo, it's still a top 3 player in the NBA, and there's no reason to believe that he should have any sort of decline. Chris Middleton's going to be healthy again, and Drew Holiday is still going to be a very good player out at guard. That trio is still going to be one of the best trios in the league and are going to work very well to bring Milwaukee back to the forefront of contention. Next up, we have the Brooklyn Nets, and the Nets are very interesting. In fact, so interesting, I'm going to have to do this. That's right, folks. The Brooklyn Nets are truly an enigma because Kevin Durant is looking for a trade, and it's not even looking like Kyrie Irving is still going to be there. So if those pieces get traded, this is a drastically different team. We just kind of have to wait and see how these teams shake out. And next up, we have the New York Knicks, who I'm going to put in this sort of play-in territory. I think Julius Randle is going to have a bounce-back year. He had a very, very down year in New York last year after he signed his contract, but I think Julius Randle is a much better player than a lot of people give him credit for, and we saw the flash of his potential in 2021. I don't think the Knicks are still contenders unless RJ Barrett just takes another step or Emmanuel Quickley takes another good step. Jalen Brunson is going to be a very good addition, but I don't know how well they're going to stack up in this Eastern Conference. I think they're squarely the 8 seed or 9 seed, somewhere around there. Next up, we have the Toronto Raptors, and Toronto is very interesting. I'm going to put them right here in this sort of mid-category, in the mid-playoff seeds. I think Pascal Siakam is still going to be a very good player. The way that players like Gary Trent and OG Anunoby move around at the spacing that Toronto has is very good. This is a team that does have a lot of potential. They just need to realize it with younger players like Scotty Barnes. And if Scotty Barnes does take another leap, he was very, very good in his rookie year. I think Toronto might be starting to inch into that category where they compete. I think they're the 5 or 6 seed in the East right now, and I think they have potential to go up from there. Next up is the Utah Jazz. And the Jazz are very interesting because they did trade away Rudy Gobert, who is their second best player, but they got a big haul in return. I think getting players like Jared Vanderbilt and Patrick Beverly in return, as well as all of the draft capital, which the draft capital isn't going to affect their play on the court this year, but having those players around Donovan Mitchell and continuing to build around him is going to be very good, and I don't really have any reason to believe that they are going to take a huge step back outside of maybe post play and protecting the rim. So ultimately, I think the Utah Jazz are still going to be somewhat competitive, but probably not in that upper echelon. Next up is the Houston Rockets, and Houston, I think, still has a bit of a ways to go before they compete. They did get Jabari Smith, and they have a few good pieces, but they did trade away Christian Wood, who was one of their best players last year, and they no longer have John Wall, who, while not as good as he used to be, that's still a very big piece for Houston. They do have a bit more cap space because John Wall's gone now, and his ginormous albatross of a contract is not there anymore, but Houston, I think, still needs a year or two to really realize their potential and have Jabari Smith gel on the court. I think they will still be not the best team this year. Next up, we have the New Orleans Pelicans, and some people are going to call me crazy for this, but they are going to be one of the best teams in the Western Conference. Having Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum work so well together last year is going to be fantastic, and they continue to have great players like Jonas Valanciunas and a young core developing with Jose Alvarado and Herb Jones. Adding Zion Williamson to that mix. If Zion Williamson is 80% the player that he has the potential to be, this is going to be a dominant team, especially having Valanciunas and Zion play at the 4 and 5 together is going to be such a great dynamic duo that can easily kick out to Ingram or McCollum. And I'm very excited to see this team play. This is must-watch basketball right here. The New Orleans Pelicans are going to be very competitive. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Lakers, and they are one of the bigger mysteries in the NBA. For now, I cannot place them any higher than this 42-48 win category, and I know that they won 33 games last year. They underperformed in one of the biggest disappointments in NBA history, akin to, the 2013 Nets level of disappointment. But if you have a team with LeBron James, and you have a team that has a healthy, keyword healthy, this list is just assuming that health is going to not be a huge factor, which I know it always is, but we're just going to assume the best here because we're the optimists here at the Coffee Pot. But ultimately, when you have LeBron and AD, you cannot count out that team. And if you continue to build players like Lonnie Walker, who I'm much higher on than a lot of people, I think Lonnie Walker is a very good player. He's sort of a replacement for Malik Monk, but with a better defensive ball and has a little bit better spacing IQ. So Lonnie Walker, I think, is an upgrade from Malik Monk, but of course they are still going to be needing a lot more depth. You can't get it done with just, Stanley Johnson and Talen Horton-Tucker. They need to add some more quality to their depth, which is going to be very difficult considering the huge contracts to LeBron and AD. And Russell Wilson, this is not an NFL video. Russell Westbrook is really the wild card here. If he stays, maybe he develops under Derwin Ham a little better, but at this point, we really don't know. So I'm just going to put the Lakers in this category and see where they go from here. The Chicago Bulls, same category. Zach LaVine is very, very good, and I'm glad they're keeping him, but DeMar DeRozan is another year older, and it's not looking great for the center play. The trade last year was not looking too good, and Andre Drummond is a decent backup center, but really not the best option, especially when they had Derrick Jones Jr., who could play the 5, as Rusty Buckets actually just talked about in a video that I saw earlier today. And I think that was a really good system for them, and Andre Drummond might be the piece that they are going to be a little bit of the extra man. So the Chicago Bulls, I don't think I'm very bullish on, but they're still going to be very good enough with Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan to be competitive in the playoffs. They might not get out of the first round, but they'll be competitive either way. The Minnesota Timberwolves. with Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns, that is the best 4 and 5 combo in basketball right now. Karl Anthony Towns has always been a center who's very focused on offense and shooting the three and being able to pull up from range. And Rudy Gobert is about the opposite of that. He pretty much lives under the basket and is a rebound machine. There's a reason why he's been a defensive player of the year in the past. And having Karl Anthony Towns being able to go out at power forward and be able to space it out and be able to play at the mid-range level is going to be fantastic for Minnesota, especially given the fact that they still have D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Edwards at 1 and 2. That is a fantastic pairing at guard. Anthony Edwards is going to make a case this year for a first-team All-NBA level player. I'm not kidding. He has that sort of ceiling this year. We'll see if he realizes it, but Anthony Edwards is one of the most special young players in the league, and D'Angelo Russell is going to continue to be very solid. So, I have no reason to believe that the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to be anywhere close towards the middle of the pack. They are going to be probably the 3rd or 4th seed in that very stacked Western Conference. Now let's go to the Portland Trailblazers. Portland has a few pieces. Of course, Damian Lillard is still there. Anthony Simons is very good. Jusuf Nurkic is still quite good, but they don't really have a whole lot on defense, and they need a lot more pieces. Portland is the quintessential team of the doldrums right now. If they're healthy, Damian Lillard can will them to the play-in, I'm sure, but as of right now, Portland really is not showing me a lot to be excited about. Shadon Sharpe might develop into something pretty good, but as of right now, I have no reason to believe that Portland is a team that's going to be above 500. The Denver Nuggets, one of the best teams in the NBA, and there are a few reasons for this. First off, Nikola Jokic is back-to-back MVP. I don't think he's going to three-peat as MVP. That's very hard to do, and the NBA media might implode on itself if that happens. Nick Wright might have a heart attack, but considering that Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. will be back, assuming that they're back even at 90% strength, Jamal Murray was an absolute bucket when he was on the court, and Michael Porter Jr. can still continue developing that mid-range game and making sure that he's even better on offense, and that is going to be a fantastic team, especially when you add one of the best 3-and-D players in the league in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. That is going to be a very good team that is going to have some good depth because players like Aaron Gordon and Bruce Brown are going to be at it, and Aaron Gordon got a lot of space in the limelight essentially as the number 2 option with Murray and Porter Jr. gone, and Bruce Brown is a great guard that they just added. So I believe that Denver has all the pieces to really put it together and make it their year. I don't know if Denver is going to make it to the NBA Finals, but they will not be a first-round exit as long as most of their main players are reasonably healthy. The Oklahoma City Thunder are still about a year or 2 away from being truly competitive. I am very bullish on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think he's a top 25 player in the NBA right now. I think Josh Giddey is going to continue to develop and take another step after his fantastic rookie year. And Chet Holmgren, I am not quite as high on. He's still going to be very, very good. He was the number 2 overall pick. I'm just a bit concerned about his strength and the way that he's able to play on offense. Defense. Of course he's good on offense. On defense, I'm more worried about his little wiry arms. I'd like to see OKC do very well. I think Sam Presti is a very good GM, and I think he is going to ultimately put it all together, but I think that Giddey, Chet Holmgren, and a few other players need to mature just a little bit before they really can compete. And they overpaid for Lou Dort, so I get that he's a decent player, but they really gave him too big of a contract. So it might be a year or 2 away for OKC. The Memphis Grizzlies, I think, are still going to be very good, but I think I'm going to put them in this category of the middle tier of the pack. I really do like Ja Morant. I don't think he's going to have quite as good of a season as he did last year. He was phenomenal. I think that teams are going to game plan around him a little bit better now that they have time to actively plan in the offseason to make sure that he's accounted for. He's not going to be bad by any means, or even just okay. He's still going to be an NBA All-Star level player, but I think that he's not going to be quite as dominant as he used to be. And they still have some great pieces: Jaren Jackson, Steven Adams, Desmond Bane. They did lose DeAnthony Melton, which I am very high on DeAnthony Melton. I think he can be very good, but I don't think that Memphis is going to be quite as good as they were last year. So they're going to have a bit of a tougher slog in that Western Conference. The Dallas Mavericks, I am a bit conflicted on, but I think that they are still going to be incredibly competitive. Luka Doncic is a top 5 player in the NBA, and he is going to continue to be very dominant. And there's a bit of a trade-off that we've had. We've lost Jalen Brunson with the Mavericks, but they did add Christian Wood, who is a very quality big man. He's still pretty young and can continue developing, but that is a bit of a trade-off. You lose that guard presence with Jalen Brunson and that scoring ability, but you gain interior defense with Christian Wood. So it is a bit of a wash. I think Jalen Brunson is a little bit better than Christian Wood, even though it's hard to compare a guard and a center, but I think Dallas is going to be about where they were last year. They're going to be very good, and I think they're going to cement themselves as one of the top teams in the West. I think that they very well could get back to the conference championship, but I think that Luka Doncic needs one more piece around him to truly take that next step and win the NBA Finals. They're very close, but not quite there yet. The Spurs are probably going to be the worst team in the NBA, and everyone sort of knows it. They traded away DeJounte Murray for draft picks, and no one can really blame them. Their best players right now are Josh Primo and Jakob Hurtel, who are not bad players, but those are not even number 3 options on playoff caliber teams. So I think it's pretty clear what San Antonio is doing. They are looking for Victor Wembanyama, and I can't blame them for it. And I'm sorry, Spurs fans, the dynasty is long over, and it's time to build a new one with Wembanyama if they can win that lottery. They're not winning many games. Phoenix Suns, until proven otherwise, are an incredible team. They were the number 1 seed in the West last year and won 64 games. I don't think they take that much of a step back, even after they got absolutely slapped around by Luka Doncic in this conference semifinals. Chris Paul is going to be another year older, and now that he's 37, he's going to be 38 by the end of this coming season. That is really starting to get up there. He's not showing the ageless wonder features like Tom Brady does. He's not showing it quite like LeBron does. And I think he's going to take another pretty significant step back this year. We already saw how bad he was in that conference semifinals. I don't think Chris Paul can be really trusted as a number 2 option going forward. Devin Booker is still going to be very good, and Mikal Bridges is still going to be very good, but ultimately the Suns, while still one of the best teams in the league, I don't see them going back to the NBA Finals. They very well might make the Western Conference Finals, but I don't think they quite have it together this year, especially the way that they jerked around DeAndre Ayton. He's probably, in my opinion, going to get traded before the trade deadline, and that really would see the Phoenix Suns building for the future. So they're going to be very good in the regular season, probably not making it back to the finals. The Golden State Warriors are your reigning champions, and I think that they are actually squarely in this second tier because of the fact that while you could never count out the Splash Bros and Draymond Green and Andrew Wiggins, well, Andrew Wiggins, I guess he proved that he's a good player. Before that, people had some doubts before he won a championship and was honestly in conversations for Finals MVP. And I understand that Steph won the Finals MVP and he deserved it, but Andrew Wiggins, he played a very good Finals. But my point is, why I'm not putting them in this highest tier is the fact that Draymond is another year older, the Splash Bros are another year older, they are squarely in their 30s now and not at their peak, they're past their primes, even though they are still very good. And they lost Gary Payton and Otto Porter, who are very, very good pieces of that championship team. Gary Payton was phenomenal off the bench. Otto Porter even started games in the finals for them and made some pretty clutch shots. And they replaced them with Dante DiVincenzo, who is really not someone who I have a ton of faith in. Dante DiVincenzo hasn't been the same since his injury 2 years ago, and I don't think that he's going to be a suitable replacement unless Jonathan Kuminga can really prove that he should have been taken 7th overall, and he makes a massive step forward, I think the Warriors are going to have a much tougher time getting back to that mountaintop and winning another ring. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Clippers, who I'm going to squarely put in this middle category. The West is very stacked, and it's going to be, I think, the superior conference, and the LA Clippers might need a little time to mesh. Kawhi is still nursing that injury. Paul George is still going to be very good, but maybe not quite at that upper echelon of players. I don't think he's a top 10 player at this point. And John Wall is still going to be very good, but he is going to be really needing to prove himself. He's been on and off injured for so long now. This is really his chance to be this glue guy, this number 2 option truly on offense. I think Kawhi is probably at this point not your number 1 option when it comes to scoring. I think he's going to be a lot better as a two-way player, and John Wall is really going to have to make this work at point guard. So I don't know if the Clippers pull it together this season. I think by next season they really will be fully fleshed, especially if they get some younger talent in there. And I think that they're going to be a playoff team, but not quite a team that's going to compete in the later rounds. Detroit is unfortunately still in this bottom category. They lost Jeremy Grant. They got Jaden Ivey. They really have a pretty similar roster. I think Cade Cunningham's going to take another step, but some players like Killian Hayes are not really great options going forward. Kelly Olynyk is one of my favorite players. I think everyone has a soft spot for Kelly Olynyk, but he's getting older at this point and not quite as proficient. And I think Detroit just might need a year or two to fully mesh, have Cade Cunningham develop. But as for right now, I think they're still a lottery team. And here's my hot take of the day. Listen, I have a video coming out in the next couple days about why I think the Sacramento Kings are not only going to make the play-in, they are going to win in the play-in and will be a playoff team come May. I don't think that they're getting out of the first round. That would be ludicrous to say. But the Kings are not only making it to the first round, they will win a game or two against whoever their opponent is, be it Denver or Golden State or whoever. I have a video coming out soon, but all I'm going to say for now, De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, the Fox and the Ox, they're going to make it work. Trust the plan. Cleveland Cavaliers, I'm going to put in this actually second tier category. I think Evan Mobley is going to be incredible as he continues to develop. Darius Garland is great. Jared Allen is great. They re-signed Ricky Rubio, which is a really underrated move. I'm very excited to see how Ricky Rubio does. And so I think Cleveland is going to take that next step. They're not just happy to be here, but they're actually going to compete in the playoffs. Boston, until proven otherwise, are one of the best teams in the East. I think they may end up having Kevin Durant when it's all said and done, but that would come at a major cost. It would cost at least Jaylen Brown and some other pieces, but if we're just assuming right now that they're not getting KG, that's still an amazing team. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Robert Williams, Peyton Pritchard. I love Peyton Pritchard, man. That's my favorite white boy. But ultimately, the Boston Celtics are still going to be one of the best teams in the league, and there's really no contesting that right now. Philadelphia 76ers, I'm going to put in the second tier category. The 76ers are going to be very good. Of course, they have Joel Embiid, who's a borderline MVP candidate. You've got James Harden, who has lost a step. It is absolutely true, but he's still very lethal when it comes to shooting and offense. Anthony Melton is going to be a very good addition. I'm very excited to see how he does, as well as Tyrese Maxey. Those are two very young players that I'm very excited to see. The 76ers are going to be an amazing team to watch, and I think they very well could continue to develop into a very, very competitive team in that Eastern Conference. The Charlotte Hornets, I hate having to do this, but it's true. They really belong in this sub-500 category because Miles Bridges is just an absolute dumpster fire and a horrible human being. And outside of LaMelo Ball, who do they have? Gordon Hayward? Terry is a great meme, but Terry Rozier is really kind of mid, I'm sorry to say. Charlotte Hornets are not making it back to the playoffs. They might get into the play-in, they might sneak in, but they're not going to be doing very well. And speaking of teams that aren't going to do very well, the Washington Wizards. They overpaid Bradley Beal. They gave him a massive contract that also gave him a no-trade clause, which is very dumb because he's probably going to be able to fleece the Wizards in the next year or two when he wants a trade. They gave him too much money, and Tingus Pingus is still overpaid. Kristaps Porzingis really has not quite realized his potential yet, and it's unfortunate to see. I think the Wizards have ability in Beal and Porzingis, but they are not a winning duo, at least yet, and they lost KCP, which really is not a good sign for their defense. So I can't in good faith put them in even a competitive territory. I think this is still very much a lottery team. The Orlando Magic are a lottery team, but they are not going to be the worst of the worst. They were, the number one pick this past year. They're going to develop very well. I'm very excited to see what Orlando does, and I think they're going to play very good basketball. I think they're squarely in this area that's going to be 29, 30, 31 wins, right at the top of this category. I think Paolo Banchero is amazing. He was a slam dunk of a pick at number one, is going to continue to be very well. Cole Anthony is very good, and one player that I'm very interested in is Markelle Fultz. He kind of fell off the map after being drafted first overall. We all saw what happened to him, but he's quietly been making a very good comeback in Orlando. I'm very excited to see how he does this year, especially paired with players like Jalen Suggs and Franz Wagner. Cole Anthony. Very excited to see this young Orlando team. This team, out of all the teams in this bottom category, outside of perhaps the Thunder, I think have the most potential in the next 2 years, not counting whoever wins Victor Wembanyama or any of the other great prospects in the 2023 draft. The Miami Heat, I'm trying to decide if I want to put them in the above 55 wins or in the 48 to 54. For now, I think I'm going to put them in the 48 to 54 category. Kyle Lowry and Victor Oladipo are going to get another year older. Victor Oladipo is squarely out of his prime at this point. You still have Jimmy Butler, who, in my opinion, is a top 10 player. You have Bam Adebayo, who's very good on defense, but is never really going to be this 25 and 10 guy. He's going to be somewhat limited on offense. Tyler Hero is still going to be very good off the bench. I like Duncan Robinson, even though he did have a down year. I just don't think that they are going to be quite as good without Kyle Lowry being at the top of his game, and Victor Oladipo is probably going to be a minus player for them. I still like Oladipo, but seeing him as a number 3 option at this point and the contract that he has, I think that he really is more of a role player at this point. So if they wise up and give Victor Oladipo less than 30 minutes a game, I think it's possible to be in this 55 tier. But as of right now, as it stands, I think they're going to be somewhere in this category as a 3 or 4 seed in the East. The Atlanta Hawks, I'm putting them in 48 to 54. I am very, very excited to see Trae Young and DeJounte Murray play alongside each other. I think that's a fantastic fit. Even though they did lose Kevin Huerter, I think that's a great fit right in those guard spots that are going to play very well off of each other. And of course, you still have John Collins and Clint Capella, who are great pieces down by the basket, and I'm very excited to see this team progress. I think Trae Young is going to, by the end of this season, be a top 10 player. DeJounte Murray is going to thrive in this system, and Atlanta is going to be quite competitive. I think they come out of the first round, maybe not out of the second round. That might be their realistic potential this year, but I'm very excited to see Atlanta and Trae Young. And finally, we have the Indiana Pacers. I'm putting them in this 32 to 41 category. They did lose Malcolm Brogdon, but they got some quality pieces back and didn't really need him because they have Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese Halliburton was given up for not as much as I would like to Sacramento, but I believe Sacramento is still going to be very, maybe not very good, but they're going to be playoff caliber this coming season, as you'll see in a future video. But Tyrese Halliburton is still going to be a very good player. With Miles Turner and Tyrese Halliburton and other pieces like Caris LeVert and Buddy Hield are going to be a very good combo to watch. I'm interested to see how their spacing is going to be. I don't know if it's going to be the best in the world, but I think Indiana is going to take a real step forward with Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner. So this is where it stands right now. You've got Milwaukee, Denver, Phoenix, and Boston at the very top echelons. And then below that, you've got your teams in the second tier: New Orleans, Minnesota, Dallas, Golden State, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Miami, and Atlanta. And the tiers that are probably the 5, 6, 7 seeds, you've got the Toronto Raptors, Utah Jazz, LA Lakers, Chicago Bulls, Memphis, LA Clippers, and Sacramento Kings. In the sort of play-in category, the sub-500, you've got New York Knicks, Portland, Charlotte, and Indiana. And then the teams that I think are really going to be in the conversation for a top 3 pick or even a top pick are Houston, Oklahoma City, San Antonio, Detroit, Washington, and Orlando. And the Nets, we'll see. They could be a 60-win team. They could be a 30-win team. We'll see where Kevin Durant goes. But that's going to be really it for me right now, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time on Coffee Pot Sports.